The national debt is already at an absurdly incomprehensible number like $23 trillion, and increasing by the minute. We're already in a mathematical fantasy land beyond the limits of human understanding. A stack of trillion-dollar bills would be 67,866 miles high, or more than one-fourth the distance from the Earth to the Moon. This means the deficit before the pandemic would have been a stack of dollar bills more than 5 times as high as the distance to the Moon. The national debt is never going to be paid. It will always go up. The Fed will monetize the debt at negative interest rates. The Treasury debt the Fed will hold will have an average negative yield. They will pay the Treasury interest, but in reality, that will just require a wind down of reinvestment, so it actually isn't anything real. These are all ledgers with lots of zeros. At some point, the Fed will have to buy all of China's holdings as they liquidate, and then all the Social Security surplus holdings. And they will pay well to keep rates very, very low. With negative interest rates, people will pull their savings from banks and buy gold, if they have brains. Banks will not lend to get less back. Scared people will stop buying and start hoarding cash. The economy grinds to a halt. This is the great implosion, coming soon to an economy near you. The Fed is creating a bubble economy. Once people understand it is all about the Fed, maybe things will change, but not until then. They are using fear and misinformation to herd the sheep where they want them to go seems to be what's going on today. Even Powell, Yellen and Bernanke are telling the Congress not to worry about the deficit. Just keep spending. What he doesn't tell this naive Congress, and the President, is that getting the government to spend even more reduces the government's power, and increases the Federal Reserve's power over America. They want the Congress to keep spending in order to make our government as bankrupt as possible. The more deficit spending on our government's part, the better for them. This is what the purpose of this coronavirus agenda is. Bankruptcy for all, and the transfer of all financial control into their hands. They want to remove all financial power from world governments and place all financial power in the hands of this secret fraternity at the very top, who are in control of this international banking system. Their target is the removal of the US dollar and replacing it with their long-desired, one world currency, owned and controlled by this secret fraternity at the very top. Yes, the domination of this world by way of the monetary system. It isn't apparent yet, but it will be, when they put the icing on this coronavirus cake by pulling the plug on the world markets and creating the biggest market collapse in history. Why? They are currently bankrupting our governments. Now they want to place us in a complete state of hopelessness by bankrupting all of us individuals also. So, in the end, the people who created this evil will present themselves as our saviors by making us an offer we will have no choice but to accept. Accept our one world currency in place of all other currencies, including the US dollar, and we'll bail you out. As I said, they will leave us with no other choice but to accept. And due to their power of absolute secrecy, all we have the power to do is watch the show. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell warned that the nation's unemployment rate could soar to 25%. Powell says a full economic recovery may not happen without a vaccine. Full recovery could take until end of 2021. Will require a coronavirus vaccine, Powell said in an interview with CBS's 60 Minutes. Why would a cartel banker, bean counter, have a say as to whether a vaccine is needed or not? Just following orders will not be a defense, Powell. So, Fauci, the MD, became an economist, and Jerry Powell, the economist, is now a doctor. Do we live in a bizarro world, or what? Those who wish to inoculate themselves against this flu should do so. If it works as advertised, they have their immunity. Those that do not wish to take the vaccine pose no threat to them. Compelling the rest of us to be vaccinated is going to be an interesting operation. A vaccine or market manipulation, either will do it. The Fed has launched a series of efforts to keep markets functioning properly and has teamed with the Treasury Department on a variety of lending programs aimed at businesses and individuals. In addition, the Fed is buying corporate and municipal bonds. That's come amid burgeoning unemployment crisis that has seen 36.5 million Americans file unemployment claims and the unemployment rate rise to 14.7%. Wall Street is just like Washington, D.C. It runs on loopholes. All you have to do is learn your way back and forth through the maze of stupidity. The same people who sell the panic, sell the vaccine. Before COVID, there were 162 million active workers. Current reports indicate there are 36 million unemployed, so it's at least 22%. However, this does not include part-time workers that were laid off and unable to file for unemployment benefits. It also does not include workers that have their hours cut. This party is just getting started. By this summer, the unemployment rate could top 40% as the momentum builds. Those 36 million workers aren't spending as they did. Probably more than 100 million workers have dramatically cut spending. This is going to drive unemployment up much higher. Even if all states open up tomorrow, it is not going to be a return of business as usual. People are going to be reluctant to spend money, travel, eat out, etc., until they feel confident that the virus is gone and that the economy has stabilized. It is going to take many years. It took the US about 10 years to fully recover from the 2008 crisis, and this one is much worse. People on the minimum wage have to spend 100% of their wages to survive. Billionaires spend 1%, with 99% disposable. They live, as opposed to surviving, on this. National suicide, expected to soar. The shooting starts shortly after the USDFRN reaches its intrinsic value as electrical bits and poorly absorbent toilet paper. Losing may be winning if the stupid masks, closures, distancing, handouts, bailouts, negative interest rates, alleged forced vaccination plans, etc. turn fattened human flocks of idiot sheep into lean, hungry packs of intelligent wolves. Exciting times. That's what happens when counterfeiting enables deficit spending. Eventually, the world will realize the dollar is worthless with all this printing. Then this debt will be an issue and only an internal issue for us the peasants. It's the money, stupid. Founding Father axiom. It all depends on whether the US loses reserve currency status over a long period or a short period. The national debt is ballooning, and one day we would default on it. Math can only be stretched so long until an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. During 2008 bailouts, experts were saying, now is not the time to worry about the debt, we can address it once we're past the crisis. The debt was never addressed, other than the Bowles-Simpson plan, which failed. I'm hearing the same thing now about this crisis and the staggering debt being piled on. Another frightening number on that debt clock is that of the total value of global derivatives. Judging by the fast-rolling number counter, it appears it's increasing by over $2 million a second. Mind-blowing numbers, all just waiting to collapse when the defaults begin. Ever heard of marginal change? The effect of one more unit on the whole. A sinking boat and that 1 pint of extra water that sends it to the bottom. A sinking economy with a Fed deficit. The effect of one more dollar of debt. The closer you get to the breakpoint, the more important the marginal change. Are we there yet? If not $25 trillion, then 25.1 trillion, 30 trillion, 400 trillion. Has it already happened? Is the economy finished, and we just don't know it? Already the word is out there as a massive problem. Interest rates are being forced lower because the country cannot afford to pay interest on the current debt. With low interest rates, no one with a brain wants to lend the US money. The Fed has to step in. Now, the debt is faux debt, just zeros on the Fed balance sheet, and ready to implode. If this is not warning enough, what is? When I activated the US debt clock time machine for the year 2024, just 4 years from now, it showed that at the current growth rate, we would see a national debt of $43.6 trillion. In 4 years. That is unsustainable. Something must be done right away to bring it down, or a disaster will occur within the next few years. America must pull its head out soon, or a calamity will soon occur. This is digital Weimar currency. They won't even have the problem of printing on one side of a bill. That's why we are going to experience a monetary reset. This apparently happens to every monetary system not tethered to something that can't be printed out of thin air. That being said, the deficit can reach 50 trillion or 100 trillion. The small business issue came from the shutdown and excessive regulations for the most part. It will eventually become a problem, and the system will collapse. This shitshow will only get worse until the final collapse. So expect the unimaginable all the time going forward over the cliff. COVID was a convenient excuse the crash land this debt-loaded, massively leveraged economy. The string pullers opted for Flight 1549 in the Hudson River rather than the Hindenburg Zeppelin exploding and going down in flames. Strange how the pandemic is so well coordinated and the New World Order elites are all singing the praises of an as yet non-existent vaccine, which clearly is going to be compulsory with the implied threat of military force. The death rate in the non-high-risk groups, even using the inflated mortality numbers, is around 0.1%, so what is the scientific basis for a compulsory vaccination for all without any understanding of the risk-benefit equation for low-risk cohorts, most of the population? Other than the social control. There remains the medical ethical principle of informed consent. Well, I am informed, and I don't consent. What then? Why are we still pretending that COVID-19 is a particularly deadly virus and that we must destroy ourselves out of fear of it? All those who want to be locked up forever should just go ahead and lock themselves up forever and leave us the hell alone. Why do people with horrific plans always insist that we have to join their suicide pact for our own good? The Hong Kong flu of 1969 was way worse than this Wu-Tang flu, and they did not shut down the economy. This is an intentional sabotage of the world economy. The aims are many: to impose a worldwide plutocracy served by tech stooges and psycho-scums, to impoverish people to the level they won't ever protest politically, to overthrow the role of people in politics that is on the rise ever since 1789. Call it whatever you want, but this is no pandemic. Get ready for millions of bankruptcies, loan defaults, and bank failures. Millions of retirees will lose almost all of what was promised as big pension funds fail. Powell admits it will get very ugly, and no one knows how or when this ends. If reopening brings on wave number 2 and they have to close it all up again, kiss any recovery hopes goodbye. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. $3 trillion more debt planned, and Powell says now is not the time to worry about it, only when the economy has recovered. What the hell? We haven't worried about it for the last 2 decades since Cheney said, deficits don't matter. Our great economy has never been anything more than a bubble pumped up by endless debt thanks to the Fed Bank. The wealthy are doing great, and the bottom 50% are unemployed, maybe forever. The banksters are loving it and want to keep us shut down to do the most damage. We are in real trouble. Pray for a miracle. Bailouts, more printing, baby print, print. Insanity continues. With negative rates looming and is coming, Fed can't raise any rates higher, is too late for that, so their only option is going reverse. You are going to see some funny thing happening. The economy has been spiraling for a long time, and not only in the US, unprecedented access to cheap cash, lack of any fiscal responsibilities, plus mounted with other policies and reality has also produced a fallout. Now banks has put a tight lid on line of credit access, which basically is putting small businesses folks in the cold, and not to mention others who have to meet certain obligation is putting them in a state of what is a sense. Lady in casino dancing for the bosses is starting to sweat. She realizes she is expandable and no longer can entice them. MMT, QEs etc. And top with it, they will squeeze the last amount of breath from anyone. ECB, Fed, BOJ and other central banks around the world, and don't think China is excluded, fiat is fiat, they flow same way, just the value is different, are on a collision course of facing final act. Total bankruptcy and insolvent of nations due to internal debt which is way beyond understanding, and external debt of the rations to GDP debt, which is already putting heavy iron plates on their shoulders. They will default, and not only the US but all of them will not meet their obligation. So next scheme is digital, but the game is the same, bosses are well aware of their needs. They all soft defaulted in 2008 when all of the major central banks started QE, and never really stopped. The issue is now that with the shutdown of essential production, it is going to lead to shortages, leading to price controls, rationing and inflation. The entire industrialized world is switching over to third world status. I very much doubt digital will work. It just makes it much easier to create inflation, and it is 100% dependent on reliable data and power to function. The government digital currencies will likely be too easy to print when they need it and will quickly collapse in value. The Achilles heel of the industrialized world economies is tax revenue need to balance government spending with production. Tax revenue is all but collapsed, while essential government spending has gone to the moon. The US is a dollar exporter, and both parties' donors won't allow anything else. If we ran a trade surplus, Wall Street's casino would close. The American people don't understand how corrupt this country is. The aim is to fleece the people quickly into debt slavery, where the shirt on their back is owned by banksters. The powerless people on the bottom of the food chain get hurt the most, but the fat cats with political influence are able to get the big bailouts. Basically, the Fed has de facto created royalty in the world. They are the elites, rich, bankers, and the well-connected. They know that no matter what, the Fed will save them. The working man has no chance. The head of the country's financial system, Jay Powell, is saying the answer to the country's woes is social distancing and forced injections by the military. America is already finished as a country. The dollar will lose its status as the world's reserve currency. It won't be long, and we won't be able to trade our pretty pieces of paper in exchange for real goods and services. The federal government will have to spend at least $1 trillion less than it does now. We won't be able to get away with our trillion-dollar trade deficit much longer either. We've been getting a lot of Chinese products at artificially low prices for a long time. An iPhone would probably cost $5,000 if it was made in America. Expect the 2020s to be a lot like the 1930s. This was the Atlantis Report. Please like, share, subscribe. And please take some time to subscribe to my backup channels. I do upload videos there too. You'll find the links in the description box. You will also find a PayPal link if you want to make a donation. Thank you wholeheartedly to all those of you who have already donated. Stay safe and healthy, friends.